Stone by day, warriors by night. We were betrayed by the humans we had sworn to protect, frozen in stone by a magical spell for 1,000 years. Now, here in Manhattan, the spell is broken and we live again. We are defenders of the night. We are Gargoyles. Today on the Comic Book Report, Gargoyles, here in Manhattan, Volume 1. Stick around and check it out. Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I've got another comic book review for all of you coming by way of Dynamite Entertainment. That's right, we're looking into the world of Gargoyles. Based on the hit animated series from the 90s, suffice it to say, this book packs a lot of punch. And I can't wait to jump in and review it all for you, so why don't we get started? First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Weisman and penciled by George Kambadais. The comics in this volume were initially published by Dynamite Entertainment beginning in 2022. The volume itself collects Gargoyles, issues 1 through 6. And finally, this is a standard size hardcover edition with glossy print paper stock, a glued binding, and a total of 160 pages. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and issue a general spoiler warning. I'll be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first look at that standard size hardcover from Dynamite Entertainment. Yes, this is Gargoyles, here in Manhattan, Volume 1. This is the new kind of kicked off comic book series that follows after the events of the 90s animated series. Incidentally, this was also released in a paperback collection, but again, this is the hardcover. Transitioning to the spine, I really like the color they chose, this kind of goldenrod looking color. I just think it really stands out nicely on the bookcase. Love the font choices we get across the spine. Yes, this is also by Disney, a Disney property. And at the bottom of the spine, we do have that volume 1, which is always nice to see because that's indicative of future editions. And the back of the book retains a lot of the same color scheme, which is nice to see. We have some of those brilliant fonts as well. We don't have any art on the back cover, which I would have maybe liked to see a little bit more, but I still think it's a really sharp, well-designed back cover. I should say, if you haven't noticed already, this is a hardcover without a dust jacket. I, for one, don't really miss the dust jacket, but I just thought it would be worth noting for all of you prospective collectors out there. Okay, and now we're going to switch over to a quick look at that binding. So as I mentioned, this is a glued binding, and I'll just say from the jump, my copy was a little bit stiff. I don't feel like the pages laid very well, kind of flatly against the book. Perhaps upon subsequent readings, the binding will loosen up a bit more. It's not a bad binding. I didn't find gutter loss to be too terrible throughout the collection or anything like that, but a little bit stiffer than what I'm used to. Okay, now we can go ahead and jump into the collection proper. And after those opening pages like the title page, we actually do have a great introduction from Weisman, who is not only the writer of this collection, but one of the original co-creators of the Gargoyles franchise. In the introduction, we have him talking about the journey of that animated series and how he ultimately got to this current comic book publication. Now, there have been other Gargoyle comics, but this is the first of kind of the relaunch over here at Dynamite Entertainment, and he basically explains what you can kind of expect, which I really liked. I think it set the tone quite well. After that, we have the little introductory blurb that I read at the beginning of the video, and then we basically jump right into issue 1. I do like that between each issue, we have almost these chapter break pages as well. I think that was a nice kind of graphic and format choice for this edition, and I think it makes this collection look extra sharp. Now, as we dive into the comic itself, I should say I was largely concerned about one thing before picking up this book, and that was really how much I have to remember from that original animated series. I remember it punctuating my childhood, but it was never a series I really watched end to end, and I did have a casual passing memory of a lot of the main characters, primarily Goliath, that main big purple gargoyle, but my memory was a little rusty, and I didn't finish the series, and I know that this comic comic takes place afterward. I was concerned I'd feel really alienated by this book, and I think overall I wasn't totally fish out of water, although there were definitely moments. So, if you're wondering, can a brand new reader with no knowledge of Gargoyles pick up this comic and enjoy it? I would say yes, you can pick it up and catch up. I think it fills in the gaps in areas you need. However, I do think it's going to be largely a struggle to really catch up completely without having some knowledge of that animated series or having never watched it before. I do think Weisman does make this a pretty good on-ramp just for new readers, but again, I think having a knowledge of that animated series would certainly help. As far as what we get for the storyline, just quick context for anyone that is going in completely blank. This is in a world where these kind of mythical creatures known as gargoyles exist. They are fully sentient with minds similar to humans, but when the sun comes up, they turn to stone. As the sun sets, they crack through the stone and awaken, and they are these kind of bipedal, winged, kind of monstrous-looking gargoyles. They speak English, and we have a really fun, eclectic cast of characters that are very familiar for fans of the animated series. Like I said, this does pick up after that series, so a lot of the pre-built relationships we see here have already been developed in that animated series. But at any rate, we pick up at a really interesting time in their history. They're here in Manhattan, just as the title would suggest, and we're right at a time where the human population is becoming more aware of their presence, but they're regarded with a lot of fear and animosity by the general public. The media doesn't paint them in very flattering light, kind of treating them like monsters. They don't really know what they're up to, what's going on, but we see them as kind of avengers. They're protectors of the people. They have deep care for everyone in their charge. They're just good, solid characters, but they get caught up in a lot of the shenanigans going on throughout New York City. Another big development we have in this comic is they have kind of this bad gangster guy who's been in prison for a long time. He is released and he's trying to gain back his criminal empire back on the street. The Gargoyle team is dealing with some of their own changes, as some of the Gargoyles have paired off and started new relationships. We have some characters about to have a baby, and the still budding romance between Goliath and the main female human lead. All of these elements are in play throughout this work. I will say the pacing of the issues is okay, but I did feel like I was trying to find the sense of direction, trying to find my bearings. I feel like I spent the first issue or two just kind of remembering some of these characters from my childhood, which was by no means a bad thing. The nostalgia value here is very strong, and the art we have from Kambadais throughout is very loyal to who these characters are while going in a different creative direction. I do think, no, this is not the same depictions or animation we get in the cartoon series, but I think it captures that same spirit, and it does so in its own particular style, which I liked. I liked that these characters were all immediately recognizable and familiar, even though they have a different art direction. I won't go through every single plot detail in this book, because I'm hoping some people will pick this up and read it for themselves, but I do want to touch on a couple of my favorite moments throughout this book. I think generally I enjoyed reliving some of these characters that I haven't really thought about or seen in many ways for quite some time. Seeing their exploits, seeing them fly around the city in these panels definitely brought back fond memories, and I do think that that is a draw for this series. It's just the nostalgia for the intellectual property. It's so exciting that Dynamite has the license for this, because I think there's a whole batch of fans of this franchise that were looking for another outlet, and to have one of the co-creators as the main writer, I just think it's a great way to delve back into this world with that sense of fidelity. Like, this feels like the show, so if you're a fan of the show, I think you're almost guaranteed to like this. Another thing I enjoyed was I like that we're in this moment of time in this universe where the humans are just starting to broadly be aware of the presence of the gargoyles. I think there was moments, if I'm remembering correctly, where they were kind of in the shadows and not really globally known, but now it's kind of getting out on media, and a lot of humanity is trying to come to terms with what is their standing in the world. Do they have rights? What are they? Do they mean us harm? And I think that how they approach these issues, even in the pages of this book, are really striking and fun, and I think that they set up some good conversation for maybe the future of this franchise. Another thing I like as well is kind of the recurring theme that I remember seeing in some of the Gargoyle stuff of kind of the betrayal or trust that these characters have with humanity. The fact that they were frozen for 1,000 years all came on the heels of this huge betrayal by these humans they trusted. So when they first got unfrozen from stone in the pilot of that, Gargoyle series, the animated series from the 90s, there was a lot of trust that had to be built back up. And certainly there's a lot of great trusting relationships and a lot of really broken betrayal throughout this franchise, and we see those same things echoed here in this work. There's even an imprisonment issue or two where Goliath gets captured by the humans, and it's really just a fascinating study on what does that gargoyle humanity kind of relationship look like, and how can we best explore it? What is the nature of these creatures? And I really like that angle. I thought it was really fun. And I think with the art, we also have that kind of animated levity that you feel with some of this series. That's not to say it couldn't be dark, brooding, and intense, but the animation definitely helps curb some of the darker moments and make it feel like a little bit lighter, even when dealing with harder subject matter. To this end, I would say, for those curious, I think that this is a fine, family-friendly read that children could enjoy as well. I do think that a primary core audience for this is likely the 90s kids that are into comic books or just really like this franchise, but I think for a whole new generation of readers who want to check it out, you have Gargoyles, so there is that nice edge to it, but I do think it's largely child-friendly, which is fun, and honestly a similar line that they struck with that animated series all those years ago. I did think it was fun to revisit this world. I will say another thing about this Volume 1 is I think this is just half of the first story arc. I really do think there's going to be a Volume 2 that finishes out the main story here. I think to that end, this book feels partially finished. I am aware that I'm reading about half of a story arc, so I am curious to see where it goes because I think it left quite a few things up in the air. But it did whet my appetite for this world in general, and I was pleasantly surprised to see how well this translated to the comic book medium. One of my favorite features of this book, though, is after those main issues, we have a great portion of extras, including one of the most immense variant cover art galleries I've seen in recent memory. Unfortunately, these variant covers don't get full-size pages. I'm sure that would have added another 50 or 60 pages to the book easily. No, instead we have these nice little thumbnails where each of the variants are kind of mapped out to the creators, things like that. I would have loved to see some of these presented in full page, but overall, I think it was still really fantastic, and I love to see all the extras packed in at the back of this little standard hardcover. We also had some script to paneling kind of behind the scenes progress pictures, which was really fun, some solicitation for further works. Overall, this was a really fun collection, and that really is Gargoyles Here in Manhattan Volume 1. If you've been reading these Gargoyle comics, or if you're a fan of the 90s series, you'll have to let me know all about it in the comments. I'd love to hear some discussion. And now, I think it's time to give this a grade. For a very fun, nostalgic work that was immediately reminiscent of the 90s series it sequelizes, The Comic Book Report is happy to give Gargoyles Here in Manhattan Volume 1 a B-. I did think this was a fun work, but without the full story arc, it was a little hard to evaluate by itself. The art was definitely really nice and evocative of that show, even though the style was a bit different. I will say I did have a bit of a barrier to entry to dive back into this world, having not finished the animated series myself. But for what we got, I still think it was really fun, and if you do like these characters, I think you're in for a great ride. I still put this as an above average read, and I think that, again, if you're the target demographic for it, you're in for a treat. But this is perhaps not the easiest first step into the world of Gargoyles. But that's just my opinion. Again, let me know what you think in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. This has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, comment, and maybe check out another video on your way out. Thanks, have a good one.